In this video, I'd like to look at a HTML page with a SVG element on it, and then that SVG element is going to be populated by some JavaScript to make uh, to sort of reproduce or make an homage to a work by Bridget Riley called Disturbance. So let's have a quick peek at what it looks like. She worked in what was called op art. Her early work was largely black and white, and then she moved into more colorful work. This was one of the earlier ones, the black and white. And so we have some kind of ellipse shape that is repeated and in different positions, but also sort of rotated. And so that's what I want to play with, sort of picking up a basic shape and sort of copying it and sort of transforming it, translating it, and rotating it. So here we go. Here's the HTML page. So here is the URL. So if you want your own copy. And again, sort of it came there's a work by Bridget Riley. I saw it in a book called Bridget Riley out of Tate Publishing, page 71, plate 14, editor Paul Morehouse. All right. So here is my SVG in the HTML body. And I have, here's my start of SGV and end of SGV, and mostly it's a definition and then a comment. Okay. And then I will be using JavaScript code to sort of really fill it up. But here is, I use the defs tag. So I'm defining something that I'm going to use later. And then I'm going to use a bunch of elements that are, usually when you're working with SVG, you have things like rectangle, line, circle, ellipse. And here is the only place you're going to sort of see one of the basic shapes, ellipse. And then I'm going to use like containers and transformations and you sort of use this definition that I made and so on. Well, let's look at the definition. So I have two things that I'm defining, and these are just sort of definitions. So I have, and again, this doesn't draw anything. It's just setting up some definitions, and I give them some ID, so I will refer to them later by their IDs. When I'm making copies of them, so I called it ellipse 1, my ellipse 2. I am centering them. An ellipse has two radii, a horizontal radius and a vertical radius, and a horizontal center CX, a vertical center CY, a radius in the X direction and a radius in the Y direction. So those radii are different. So that makes it distinct from a circle, and then it's elongated. So a horizontal radius is different from the vertical radius. And I filled the one that has a larger radii. Both radii are larger. I filled it in black. And then I had one with the same center, but smaller radii, and filled it in white. And so you see that is this basic shape. Two ellipses, one on top of the other, a black one, and then a white one. It looks a bit like an O, but it is two ellipses with the same center. Okay, and that is just my definition. And then I just have some sort of references here in a great big comment. Strictly speaking, within an SVG tag, I think the things that are internal, I think, are strictly speaking XML. But you can use, they look a lot like HTML, and you can use what I think of as an HTML comment. Okay, so I'm going to be using a G tag, and that is sort of a container. So I can put a number of things in a container, and then I'm going to put ellipse 1 and ellipse 2 in a container, and then I am going to transform the container. So G is a container, which I'm going to put things. The defs was where I'm putting my elements, not to put them on the page. I mean, if that were on the page with a center of 0, 0, you would see sort of, a quarter of an ellipse up in the very corner up here, which we do not. So I put a border around the SVG so you could see exactly where it is. So that, again, is just a definition. So that's one of the tags is a definition of something to use later. Use is for you to use some element you made elsewhere. So I'm going to use something I define, and I'm going to put them in a container G. So I have my definition. I'm going to use my definition and put them in a container. And then I'm going to transform that container. I'm going to translate it and rotate it. You can translate and rotate. You can also scale. I could make them bigger. I could skew them in two different orientations of skewing and matrix. I don't know what matrix is, frankly. I'll have to look that one up. But these are things one can do to transformations one can do. And I'm going to transform the container. So I'm going to translate the container and rotate the container. And I'm going to use a rotate that is about a point, and I think it'll be a point in the container. Okay. And then this was just me practicing with containers and use, but it's still commented out. So this was me seeing if this was working before I brought in the JavaScript. So it did work. And so now I'm finally bringing in the JavaScript. So again, the only real thing other than comments in my SVG are these definitions of these two concentric ellipses. Okay. I'm getting my element that I'm going to add to my SVG element I'm going to add to. I have, these are my rows. So I'm going to have 25 basic rows. I'm actually going to have more like 49 rows. So I have this sort of top row you see across the top, and then I have this sort of, I don't know, second half partial row or something like that. So there'll be 25 of these ones and start over at the edge. There will be 25 of them. There'll be sort of 24 internal ones. Okay. So this R is counting the 25. And then I am making, so R is rows. So I'm going down rows. And then C is going across columns. So that's why I called it R and C. So these are the columns. I am create element usually doesn't include the SVG tags, but you can expand the namespace. So that's what the NS, expand the namespace to include the SVG definitions. I'm going to get a G element, which is that container. I am going to take my container, and so that's, okay, so that is making the container, and then I am transforming the container. So there's a sort of a transform attribute, and there is a translate and a rotate, and I want them to be calculated because I want the amount of rotation to change, and I want with both row and column, and I want the translation to be changing both with row and column. And so I'm using these little tick marks to get a template literal. So I can, instead of concatenating something together, I can use this template literal, and I can sort of insert my variables into the template literal with this $sign curly bracket. So translate has sort of an X and a Y. And so I'm translating horizontally the X based on the column. So some base 40 plus 60 times my C. So each one is pushed over 60. And the second argument here is vertical. So that's based on R, and that's going down 60. And then I am rotating, and the rotation is in degrees. So I am rotating 15 degrees, and my rotation depends on the sum of R and C. So you'll find that if R plus C is the same, then they have the same amount of rotation. So if I'm on this diagonal here, these have this is maybe an R. This is a column of 2. This is a column of 1 and a row of 0. And this is a row of 1 and a column of 0. So they have the same C plus R. So they have the same amount of rotation. So that's what this is doing there. And then and that's just my element was just the container. So now I am putting something in the container. And so up here, I saw that I had my container that was transformed, and then it had stuff on the inside. And so I'm just using an innerHTML property of my element and saying that I'm putting in the 2 ellipses. So I didn't need a template literal there because I wasn't inserting any variables. All my variables are on G, not on the ellipses, but the transformation, the translation and the rotation gets applied to the children of the container. So they will also be translated and rotated, but I just work with translating and rotating the G, the container. And then I append that element. And here's what I call my in-between rows. And so I have another loop. For a row, I have this sort of secondary row or in-between row, as I'm calling it. This if is to make sure I want it to stop. I don't want 25 of these rows. I only want 24 of these inner rows. Might be a better way to do that, but that's what I came up with. And I'm stopping that inner loop at one smaller. So here it was C less than 25. Here's C less than 24. And then otherwise, for the most part, the same, creating a container, setting a transform property. It's a little farther to the right. So instead of 40 plus, I'm doing 70 plus, and it's a little farther down. So instead of 40 plus here, it's 70 plus there. But it's rotated the same amount. So you see these. So before, when I talked about them having the same rotation, I was talking about this one and that one, but now also this in-between one also has that same amount of rotation. And give it some innerHTML and append the child to my overall SVG container. And there I am done. And then again, just one more time, I have my little paragraph at the bottom saying that this was based on a work by Bridget Riley from 1964. And I got it from a book called Bridget Riley, edited by Morehouse from Tate museums over in Britain, page 71, page 14. And it is this pattern that sort of looks cool and then starts to hurt your eyes after a while. So that's what I wanted to show you, some SVG stuff, play around, container, transform, translate, rotate, definition, use. So just a little bit of fun SVG and JavaScript. Okay, that's it. Thanks for your attention.